The middle class, the American dream. What was once known as the American dream, the middle class, was. Welcome to the Financial Flow. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up on our latest videos. Today's picture is quite different. Being a middle class person feels like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So there are certain kinds of assumptions around being a middle class person that have sort of shattered. A survey in 2018 found that a third of middle-income adults don't have $400 to cover an unexpected expense. In polls, when people are asked about being middle class, they frequently are less likely to say so, and more people now urge the pollsters to suggest that they're working class. As a result, I believe that many people have considered themselves to be middle class in previous years, no longer consider themselves to be so. When we think about economic status, we think about it as some static state of the world that you are either poor or not poor. You're middle class or not middle class. But in fact, the reality is that many middle class families will experience one or a few years in poverty. In fact, most American families will have years where they'll be poor or near poor. That precarity, that uncertainty, that is now a feature of the middle class experience for most US families. What exactly happened to the American middle class? A study by the Pew Research Center discovered that the middle class, which was once comprised of most Americans, had steadily shrunk since the 1970s. About 61% of American adults were considered middle class in 1971, compared to just 51% in 2019. However, this issue remains widely debated when people think about the state of middle class and whether it's shrinking. It's a difficult question, and I believe the reason is that a country we haven't addressed or developed a formal definition of the middle class. The middle class is gone, and I understand that it's a sort of standard for saying that folks in the middle are hurtin', but it's just not accurate. One of the things that surprised me was the size of the middle class in the United States did not change. It was about 59% in 1985, and it was 59% in 2016. Experts instead prefer the term squeezed to describe what's happening to the middle class today. Even if the middle class hasn't statistically shrunk, I do not think that the middle class faces more in the way of pressures to maintain or even build upon their position. What it takes to be middle class and have a good life in the United States are no longer what they once were. If they are in their 30s, they may be hesitant to have children because they will realize that having a child would be prohibitively expensive. Often people don't have good enough medical care. They don't have any insurance. This all goes into making somebody part of the squeezed middle class. As the middle class lifestyle grows more expensive and uncertain, it's also moving farther beyond reach of younger generations. In 2019, just 60% of millennials were part of a middle income households in their 20s, compared with almost 70% of baby boomers. There are several reasons why the middle class is feeling squeezed. First reason is stagnated income. Between 1970 and 2018, the middle class share of aggregate income fell by 19% in the US. In comparison, the share of aggregate income for upper income households saw a rise of 19%. Another study by the Brookings Institute, income in middle class has grown half as fast compared to both the bottom 20% and the top 20% of income tiers. Once taxes and transfers were considered, middle-class workers over the last 40 years have not been able to adequately benefit from the productivity growth, the expansion of pie and economy. We measured this and discovered that the average worker has fallen 43 percentage points behind the productivity growth of an average worker. What that means is that the middle-class worker could have earned 1 percentage point more per year in compensation growth over the last 40 years. And they didn't get it because there was an erosion of labor share of overall income and because of rising inequality, such that top 10%, but particularly the top 1%, and even more so, the top 0.1%, took in much of the gains from the growth of the economy. While income stagnate, the cost of living has risen dramatically over the years. To put it into perspective, the average household income in the US saw just a 16% increase over the last 50 years. In comparison, housing costs increased by 190%, and college tuition shot up by nearly 264% in the same period. Rising expenditures, rising prices in health, housing, and education are very real. They've put a tremendous amount of pressure on income on households in the middle whose income simply doesn't go as far as it used to. Situation is even worse in cities, where the cost of living is already higher. An analysis in 2018 found that raising a family and a middle-class lifestyle in expensive coastal cities like San Francisco or New York needs an income of at least 300 grand a year. For reference, just 10% of households made 200 grand or over in 2020. Policy making might be both the fault and the solution of the middle class squeeze. There is no help whatsoever. The stagnation of wages and paychecks for people started in the 70s when productivity started growing more slowly but really accelerated after 1970. 1980, when there was a huge growth of inequality when top 1% took off. When the stock market grew, but people's paychecks didn't, and that has to do with issues of deregulation and excessive unemployment. The weakening unions, failure to rise the minimum wage, globalization with low-wage countries that really put the kibosh on the blue-collar job opportunities in many places. Point is that it's not the economy that got worse, it was that there were policy decisions made so that the economic growth did not filter down to the vast majority. We're talking about a global pandemic that's still going on. We're talking about historic levels of inflation and labor shortages that are leading to these sorts of supply chain gaps worldwide. So, I think that both things are true. The fate of the middle class could determine the future of the American dream. I just think we do need to be concerned because these influences on how people perceive the American experiment working for them, and there are the expectations that there should be this upward growth in mobility. But I think we do have an increasingly precarious labor market for many Americans, and so it's important to note that this is also a feature of inequality. It's a shame that we have as much or more poverty now than we did 40 years ago, that the middle class is earning somewhat higher wages but not in proportion to what they've increased their productivity over that time. It hurts our democracy. It impedes the upward mobility of these families' children. That entire middle class is teetering the brink of ruin. One emergency, one disaster. And you can see how quickly people who were doing good can fall off and have nothing to show for it, which should have been a wake-up call that we need to change some things. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have a good one.